Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases ever recorded in history. Before we begin, I invite you to leave a comment indicating where you are watching from and the exact time you are listening to this narration. We are interested in knowing which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. New Orleans, a city steeped in a rich tapestry of history, pulsating with the raw, untamed energy of voodoo, the mournful strains of jazz, and countless haunting legends, is a place where the veil between the living and the dead often seems impossibly thin, almost permeable. It holds secrets that even its oldest, most jaded spirits fear to whisper, truths that fester beneath its charming facade. But within the shadowy, humid, and perpetually fragrant heart of the French Quarter, nestled amongst the sprawling labyrinthine cities of above-ground ancient tombs and forgotten crypts, lies a secret so profound, so utterly terrifying, that it transcends mere folklore, becoming a palpable, insidious threat, a living nightmare. It is the chilling tale of a midnight chime, a single, impossibly deep, resonant bell tone that, since the early 1910s, has not only claimed the souls of all who hear its spectral summons, but has also meticulously, brutally stolen their very identities, leaving behind empty, hollowed husks of their former selves. Decades of unexplained disappearances, followed by the unnerving, soulless return of the vacant-eyed, the hollowed, whisper a grim truth. This chime does not merely mark the passage of time, it measures, claims, and consumes the very fabric of one's existence, the essence of one's soul, assimilating it into an unseen, ancient, and ever-growing collective consciousness. Could that chime, a spectral summons from an unseen world, a melody of profound oblivion and insidious allure, now be tolling for you, beckoning you into its eternal, silent chorus? Prepare yourself, for the secrets of St. Jude's Cemetery are far darker and far more insatiable than any mere ghost story dares to tell. Its hunger is ancient, its methods subtle, and its reach seemingly boundless. New Orleans, often referred to with a poetic reverence as the Crescent City, due to its unique, graceful bend in the mighty Mississippi River, is a place unlike any other in America. It is a city that defies easy categorization, breathing with a vibrant, intoxicating, and often contradictory blend of sophisticated French elegance, stoic Spanish resilience, powerful African spiritualism, and vibrant Caribbean mysticism. This potent, intoxicating cultural stew, simmered over centuries of shared history and profound hardship, creates a unique identity, rich in intoxicating music that flows through its veins, unparalleled cuisine that delights the senses, pervasive occult practices that delve into the unseen, and a deep, almost tangible sense of the supernatural. Its narrow gaslit streets, adorned with intricate wrought-iron balconies that cast filigreed shadows like ancient lace, and its ancient, sprawling oak trees draped in melancholic Spanish moss, paint a picture of timeless, haunting beauty. Yet, beneath this enchanting, romantic facade, beneath the layers of revelry and charm, lies a history steeped in profound hardship, relentless epidemics of disease, the brutal legacy of slavery, and a pervasive, almost physical presence of death. It is, by its very nature, a city of ghosts, where the past is never truly buried. It merely whispers in the humid, thick air, lingering in every shadow, in every forgotten alleyway, in every crumbling brick. And nowhere is this profound connection. To the departed, this impossibly thin veil between worlds, more apparent than in its sprawling above-ground cemeteries. Due to the city's unique geography, much of it built below sea level, rendering traditional subterranean burials impossible due to constant flooding, the deceased are not buried beneath the earth, but interred in elaborate, labyrinthine mausoleums and ornate, often crumbling tombs. These resemble miniature silent cities of the dead, their weathered facades standing as stoic sentinels to generations of forgotten souls, from aristocratic families to the humblest common folk. These cities of the dead are not merely burial grounds. They are considered by many, particularly practitioners of voodoo, hoodoo, and other occult traditions, to be places of deep spiritual energy, potent focal points, often revered as gateways, or liminal spaces where the boundaries between the living and the spiritual realms are exceptionally porous. Within the historic French Quarter, among the oldest and most atmospheric of these cemeteries, lies St. Jude's Cemetery. Not as famously grand or densely packed as St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, St. Jude's was a smaller, more secluded, and arguably more unsettling resting place, reserved primarily for the city's wealthier merchant families, influential politicians, and the occasional eccentric who, in life, sought solitude and, in death, seemed to achieve an eternal, undisturbed peace, or perhaps something far more sinister. Its high, moss-covered brick walls, often adorned with faded voodoo markings scratched by unknown hands, and its intricate wrought iron gate, frequently locked and perpetually shrouded in the shadows cast by ancient oaks, gave it an air of forgotten grandeur, profound tranquility, and an underlying sense of profound, undisturbed, and dangerous secrets. But beneath this veneer of tranquility, beneath the ancient stones and the quiet earth, something truly ancient, something unspeakable and undeniably malevolent stirred, its pervasive presence marked by an almost imperceptible chill in the humid air, even on the hottest days, and a faint metallic tang on the tongue like old clotted blood. A taste of forgotten dread, the specific harrowing events of our story, the very genesis of the Midnight Chime legend, unfold in the humid, oppressive, and languid spring of 1912. The air in New Orleans was thick with the cloying, intoxicating scent of jasmine, the distant, mournful strains of jazz bleeding from hidden clubs, and the ever-present heavy promise of an impending, torrential summer rain. The city was bustling with a vibrant, albeit often superficial, energy, its spirit seemingly unbowed, still slowly recovering from a devastating yellow fever outbreak that had claimed thousands of lives just years prior, leaving a collective scar on the city's psyche. Among its many residents, its grand families inhabiting stately mansions, and its hidden poor living in humble cottages, was the respected and prominent Dubois family. Jean-Luc Dubois, a distinguished shipping magnate in his late 50s, was a man of quiet dignity, meticulous habits, and deep traditional Catholic faith, his life governed by order and reason. He resided in a grand, elegant townhouse in the Creole Garden District, a bastion of old money, refined manners, and strict social etiquette. He lived with his wife, Marie Claire, a gracious, devout, and artistically inclined woman whose refined beauty was beginning to show the gentle marks of age, and their two children, 19-year-old Genevieve, a vibrant, exceptionally artistic soul with a consuming passion for classical music, particularly the piano, and a luminous, almost ethereal presence that captivated all who met her. And 15-year-old Antoine, a bright, intellectually curious, but somewhat withdrawn and melancholic boy, often lost in the labyrinthine worlds of books and his own profound, introspective thoughts. The Dubois family, a pillar of New Orleans. Society, for generations, held a prestigious family plot in St. Jude's Cemetery, a magnificent multi-tiered mausoleum built of pristine white marble, adorned with intricate classical carvings, a visible testament to their long-standing presence and considerable wealth in the city. Marie Claire especially found profound solace and a spiritual connection in visiting the family tomb, often spending hours there, meticulously cleaning the weathered stone, arranging fresh, fragrant flowers, and praying fervently for the souls of her departed loved ones. It was a cherished family tradition, a sacred connection to their ancestral roots, a tangible, unbreakable link to the past and the generations that came before. The first unsettling incident, the very first discordant note in the Dubois family's otherwise harmonious, orderly existence, occurred in late March. Genevieve, a prodigiously gifted pianist whose talent transcended her age, often practiced late into the New Orleans night, her intricate, beautiful melodies drifting through the humid air, carrying far beyond the Garden District walls, weaving themselves into the fabric of the city's nocturnal sounds. One evening, as the city slept its restless, humid sleep, a sleep often disturbed by the distant cries of street vendors or the mournful calls of riverboats, she heard it, a faint, impossibly deep, resonant chime, a single, pure bell tone that seemed to cut through the oppressive silence of the night, slicing through the usual nocturnal symphony of cicadas, distant jazz, and the subtle creaks of an old house. It was not the familiar heavy clang of a distant church bell. This sound was utterly different. It was too deep, too pure, too singular, too utterly resonant to be of mortal making, a sound that seemed to exist beyond the physical realm. It was unlike anything she had ever heard, a sound that seemed to originate not in the physical air around her, not from any external source, but directly in her very bones, a profound, almost hypnotic vibration that echoed eerily within her skull, a silent, internal summons. She paused her playing, her slender artistic fingers hovering motionlessly over the piano keys, listening intently, her artistic sensibilities deeply disturbed by the alien, unnatural beauty of the sound. The chime came again, softer this time, more insistent, more personal, as if beckoning her, calling her attention, drawing her in, dismissing it with a conscious, rational effort as a trick of the wind, a strange acoustic phenomenon unique to the old city, or perhaps a distant foghorn from the river, its sound distorted by the heavy air. She reluctantly resumed her music, though an inexplicable, pervasive sense of deep unease settled upon her, clinging to her like the city's oppressive humidity. A cold, unseen hand. The next morning she felt a strange, profound, and pervasive tiredness, a debilitating lethargy that no amount of sleep, however long or deep, seemed to alleviate. Her mother, Marie Claire, also reported feeling unusually fatigued, complaining of restless, dream-filled nights, her sleep disturbed by a deep, echoing sound that haunted her subconscious, a sound she couldn't quite place, but which filled her with a sense of vague dread. The chime, however, did not cease. It returned night after night with an unnerving, clockwork precision, always at precisely midnight, a single, resonant, impossibly deep note that seemed to originate, undeniably, from the direction of St. Jude's cemetery. At first, only Genevieve, with her sensitive artistic ear, seemed to hear it distinctly, perceiving its subtle nuances, its hypnotic rhythm. But soon Marie Claire also began to perceive it, a faint, undeniable hum that seemed to precede her restless, dream-haunted sleep, growing more insistent, more personal with each passing night, a constant, unseen companion. Jean-Luc, a man of staunch logic and unwavering reason, a pragmatist to his core, initially scoffed at their claims, dismissing them with a paternal hand-wave and a forced smile. "It is merely the city's nocturnal sounds, amplified by the night air, my dears," he declared, attempting to reassure them, to impose rationality on the inexplicable. "A distant ship's bell, perhaps, or the settling of old pipes. There is nothing to fear. You are simply overtired, your imagination's running wild." But the women's faces grew progressively paler, their eyes more sunken, etched with increasing worry, exhaustion, and an unspoken fear. Genevieve, particularly, found herself drawn almost against her will to the pervasive sound. She would sit by her open window, her normally restless, creative fingers now still, listening intently, a strange, almost magnetic pull drawing her attention, her very consciousness, towards the distant dark cemetery. Her artistic passion, once so vibrant and consuming began to inexplicably wane. Her music, once filled with complex harmonies and joyous melodies, became haunting, melancholic, simplified, filled with the inescapable echo of that single, resonant hypnotic note, repetitive and devoid of true emotion. Her personality, usually so lively, expressive, and full of youthful vivacity, grew profoundly subdued, almost catatonic. Her movements slower, almost dreamlike, her gaze often distant, unfocused, as if her mind was already elsewhere, somewhere far away, in the realm of the chime. Concerned, Jean-Luc, abandoning his initial rigid skepticism in the face of his daughter's undeniable decline, consulted Dr. Émile Laurent, the highly respected family physician, a man of science and reputation. Dr. Laurent, after a thorough but ultimately superficial examination, attributed Genevieve's alarming symptoms to nervous exhaustion, anemia, and the overstimulation of her artistic temperament, a common diagnosis for delicate young women of the era. He prescribed rest, a strong tonic, and a period of quiet contemplation, dismissing the midnight chime as a mere symptom of her overactive imagination, a byproduct of her fragile artistic psyche, a hallucination born of fatigue. Yet even Dr. Laurent, a man of empirical science, found himself inexplicably uneasy after leaving the Dubois household, a faint, lingering chill clinging to his clothes, a sense of profound disquiet that defied his medical training. The situation, instead of improving, escalated dramatically in late April, reaching a terrifying crescendo that would shatter the Dubois family forever. One night, Antoine, who had always been a light sleeper, prone to vivid, unsettling nightmares, woke up with a sudden, sharp start. He, too, heard the chime, but to him it was clearer, more resonant, more insistent, more personal than Genevieve or Marie Claire had ever described. It was a single, pure, impossibly deep, resonant tone that filled his entire room, vibrating through his entire body, resonating in his very bones, threatening to shatter him from within. But unlike his sister and mother, Antoine did not find it unsettling or frightening. Instead, he felt a strange, profound, and utterly overwhelming sense of peace. A deep, pervasive calm that permeated his entire being, washing away all his usual anxieties, all his melancholic tendencies, all his inner turmoil, leaving him utterly serene, utterly empty of self. He rose from his bed drawn by an irresistible, quiet curiosity, a magnetic pull that defied his conscious will, becoming an extension of the chime's influence. He looked out his window towards the direction of St. Jude's cemetery, shrouded in the humid night mist, its ancient tombs like silent sentinels. There, amidst the ancient tombs and sprawling mausoleums, he saw a faint, pulsing, bluish-white light emanating directly from the Dubois family mausoleum, pulsing gently, rhythmically, in perfect sync with the mesmerizing chime. He felt an undeniable urge, a gentle but insistent pull to go towards it, to understand its source, to become one with its profound peace. He dressed quietly, meticulously, his movements almost dreamlike, devoid of all conscious thought, a puppet on unseen strings, and slipped silently out of the house. He walked through the dark, silent, gas-lit streets of the French Quarter, his bare feet making no sound on the wet cobblestones, his mind utterly focused, drawn by the pulsing light and the mesmerizing, omnipresent chime. The wrought iron gates of St. Jude's, usually securely locked and impassable at night, stood slightly ajar, almost imperceptibly, as if awaiting his arrival, an open, chilling invitation. He entered the cemetery, the air suddenly colder, heavier, dense with an oppressive stillness, filled with the scent of damp earth, decaying flowers, and something indefinably alien, metallic, and profoundly organic, a stench of primordial decay. The bluish-white light now emanated directly from the Dubois family mausoleum, pulsing gently, rhythmically, beckoning him closer, promising oblivion. The chime grew louder, a harmonious chorus of resonant tones, each one filling him with a deeper sense of profound tranquility, of absolute belonging, of ultimate terrifying peace. Antoine walked towards the magnificent white marble mausoleum, his hand reaching out slowly, deliberately, for the ornate iron gate of the family tomb, his face utterly serene, utterly devoid of fear, his eyes reflecting the bluish-white light. As his fingers brushed the cold, dew-kissed metal, the chime reached an overwhelming crescendo, a single, all-encompassing, impossibly powerful tone that filled his entire being, erasing all thought, all memory, all individual identity, dissolving his very essence into the void. The bluish-white light intensified dramatically, briefly enveloping the mausoleum in a blinding, silent flash, then faded into a soft, lingering glow that pulsed once more, before finally dimming into oblivion. The chime ceased. Absolute silence descended upon St. Jude's Cemetery, a profound, unnatural, and deeply chilling silence. Antoine was gone, utterly, completely, leaving no trace behind, his existence absorbed. The next morning his parents, frantic with worry and gripped by a cold, sickening dread, discovered Antoine's absence. Jean-Luc, his previous rigid skepticism, utterly shattered by the cold, undeniable reality of an empty bed, a vacant room, and a son vanished without a trace, raced, his heart pounding with desperate hope and profound fear, to St. Jude's Cemetery. The wrought iron gates, which had been mysteriously ajar just hours before, were now tightly shut, securely locked from the inside, an impossible feat. With the desperate help of the cemetery caretaker, old Bartholomew Jones, a wizened, grizzled Creole man who had tended St. Jude's for decades and possessed a profound, if unspoken and often cryptic knowledge of the city's darker spiritual currents, they managed to force open the heavy gates. The Dubois family mausoleum, pristine and silent, stood empty. No sign of Antoine, no trace of struggle, no disturbed earth. Only a lingering faint trace of that peculiar, cloying, organic smell that Genevieve and Marie-Claire had vaguely described, now stronger, more acrid, mixed with the scent of cold stone, damp earth, and something indefinably alien, something that did not belong in this mortal world. Bartholomew, his usually placid face grim and etched with ancient sorrow, simply shook his head, his eyes clouded with a profound unspoken knowledge that transcended generations. "The bells, Monsieur Dubois, the bells have taken him. They always do. It is the way of this place, the way of the deep heart." Jean-Luc, desperate for any logical explanation, for any anchor in the swirling chaos of his shattered reality, scoffed, his voice raw with grief and disbelief. "What bells are you speaking of, old man? There are no bells here? And what do you mean, they always do?" Bartholomew, his eyes now fixed on the distant, silent mausoleum, replied, his voice a low, raspy whisper, filled with ancient fear. "Not church bells, monsieur. Something older, something from beneath the earth, from the deep mud of the river, from the ancient spirits that predate this city. They ring for the living, not the dead, Monsieur Dubois. They ring for the vibrant, for those who burn brightest, for those whose minds are open. And they take what they call. It happens every generation or so, a chosen soul, an artist, a dreamer, a thinker drawn to the chimes. They become part of the cemetery, part of the silence, part of the awareness, part of the deep heart. Jean-Luc, a man whose entire life had been built on logic, on the tangible, on the measurable, dismissed Bartholomew's words as superstitious nonsense, the fevered ramblings of an old senile man, but a cold, pervasive dread, a terror far beyond. His comprehension began to fester in his heart, corroding his reason, threatening his very sanity. The New Orleans police, led by Inspector Henri Moreau, a pragmatic but thorough officer, launched a comprehensive search operation, scouring the cemetery, the French Quarter, and the riverbanks. But they found no traces of Antoine, no signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, no footprints, no disturbed earth. The ground around the mausoleum was utterly undisturbed, as if no one had ever passed there. It was as if Antoine had simply dematerialized, walked into thin air, his very existence erased from the physical realm. Inspector Moreau, after weeks of fruitless, maddening investigation, regretfully closed the case, officially listing Antoine Dubois as missing presumed deceased, another unsolved mystery swallowed by the city's labyrinthine, often brutal, past. But in the quiet, shadowed corners of the French Quarter, in hushed whispers carried on the humid night air, the terrifying story of the Midnight Chime began to spread slowly, inexorably, like a creeping vine over ancient stones, entwining itself with the city's already rich tapestry of the supernatural. Genevieve, distraught, heartbroken, and deeply traumatized by her brother's inexplicable and horrifying disappearance, found herself increasingly haunted by the insidious midnight chime. Now she heard it clearly, powerfully, every single night, always at precisely midnight, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to pulse directly in her mind, resonating in her very skull, accompanied by a stronger, more insistent bluish-white glow emanating from the direction of the cemetery. Her profound lethargy intensified, her once vibrant, lively personality fading into a profound, chilling apathy, her artistic spark extinguished, replaced by a deep, internal void. Her once passionate music, her piano, remained silent, untouched, a poignant testament to her fading spirit, her fingers no longer able to coax melodies from the keys. She spent hours staring blankly out the window, her gaze distant and unfocused, drawn by an irresistible magnetic pull towards the distant glowing cemetery, a moth to a fatal flame. Marie-Claire, utterly terrified by her daughter's rapidly deteriorating condition, by the vacant, almost lifeless look in her eyes, by the increasing coldness emanating from her, began to pray fervently, ceaselessly, seeking solace in her unwavering Catholic faith. But even her desperate prayers seemed to be swallowed by the oppressive, profound quiet that now enveloped their once vibrant home, a silence colder than any tomb, heavier than any grief. Jean-Luc, his heart heavy with grief, guilt, and a desperate burning need to save his remaining child, abandoned all pretenses of normalcy and began his own furious, unofficial investigation, driven by a father's love and a growing, terrifying understanding that defied his every rational instinct. He returned to Bartholomew Jones, this time not scoffing, but listening intently, desperately, his face etched with a newfound, profound terror, his every word a plea. Bartholomew, seeing the raw, unadulterated fear in Jean-Luc's eyes, the desperate plea of a shattered father, confided in him further, sharing fragments of ancient Creole legends, obscure Voodoo texts, and even cryptic forbidden writings from early Jesuit missionaries who had once bravely, perhaps foolishly, settled the area, all hinting at the bell's true monstrous nature and its vulnerabilities. He spoke of the chime's heart, a colossal, living, bell-like entity, not of cold metal, but of some unknown organic pulsating material, buried unimaginably deep beneath St. Jude's, drawing its sustenance, its very life force, from the vibrant energies of the living, particularly those with strong spiritual or artistic souls, those who burned brightest, whose consciousness offered the richest fare. "It feeds on what it takes, monsieur," Bartholomew whispered, his voice trembling. "The more it takes, the stronger it grows. And now it is calling for your daughter. It has tasted her spirit, her music. It wants all of her. It needs her." Jean-Luc, a man of staunch science and rigid logic, struggled to reconcile these horrifying, fantastical tales with his understanding of the rational world, but the undeniable evidence of his own eyes, Antoine's impossible disappearance, Genevieve's alarming, almost complete decline, forced him to confront the impossible, to consider truths that defied all reason, all science. He discovered, through Bartholomew's meticulous records and his own frantic digging through ancient city archives, that St. Jude's Cemetery had a long, unsettling history of unexplained disappearances, often occurring decades, even a century apart, always associated with a sudden, inexplicable shift in the affected individual's personality, followed by their complete and utter vanishing. Old newspaper clippings, faded police reports, and even some obscure church records, all systematically dismissed or conveniently forgotten, hinted at a recurring, horrifying pattern, a cyclical hunger, a harvesting of souls. Jean-Luc, his fear, mounting to a crescendo of pure terror, yet his mind strangely lucid with a desperate resolve, spent his nights at St. Jude's Cemetery, observing a solitary, desperate sentinel, a father consumed by a desperate quest. He witnessed the faint bluish-white glow emanating from his family mausoleum at precisely midnight, pulsing with a malevolent, hypnotic rhythm, perfectly in sync with the resonant chime that now echoed not just in the humid air, but in his very being, threatening to consume his own thoughts, to shatter his own identity. He noticed, with growing horror, that other figures, silent and ghostly, almost transparent, would sometimes emerge from the deep shadows of the ancient cemetery, drawn by the irresistible siren-like call of the chime, walking in a slow, deliberate, trance-like state towards the glowing mausoleum. They were indistinct, their features blurred, their movements slow and deliberate, like sleepwalkers caught in an eternal procession. He realized with a terrifying, gut-wrenching certainty that these were the hallowed, the previous victims, countless souls from generations past, now mere extensions, puppets animated by the malevolent consciousness of the entity that commanded the chime, its endless chorus. One night, as he watched in terrified silence, hidden behind a crumbling crypt, a figure, vaguely resembling an old gardener named Thomas, who had disappeared from the cemetery decades ago, his form shimmering at the edges, walked towards the Dubois mausoleum. As it approached, the chime intensified, reaching a new terrifying pitch, and the figure simply dissolved into the bluish-white light, its essence, its last vestiges of individuality, absorbed into the pulsing maw. Jean-Luc understood with a chilling clarity that threatened to shatter his sanity. The chime was not just a summons, it was a siren's call, a predatory lure. The bluish-white light was not just an eerie glow, it was a portal, a manifestation of the entity's pervasive ancient presence. And the entity beneath the cemetery, the chime's heart, was consuming the very souls and identities of its victims, meticulously, patiently, making them part of itself, slowly expanding its collective consciousness, its monstrous sentience, its terrible eternal song. The knowledge was a burden, a curse. He rushed home, his mind a maelstrom of terror and desperate resolve, determined to save Genevieve, no matter the cost, even if it meant sacrificing his own soul, his own sanity. He found her standing by her window, her eyes wide, black, and utterly vacant, devoid of all life, all warmth, staring fixedly at the distant, pulsating glow of the cemetery. The coldness that had afflicted Big Tom and Silas, that had consumed Caleb, was now radiating from Genevieve's entire body, a bone deep chill that no warmth could penetrate, a coldness that felt utterly alien. She swayed gently, almost hypnotically, murmuring softly, her voice a hollow echo. The chime calls. Peace, belonging, so cold. But it promises warmth, such warmth. The deep heart is kind. Jean-Luc, tears streaming down his face, his heart breaking with an unbearable grief, desperately tried to pull her away from the window, to break the unseen tether that bound her. But her body felt impossibly heavy, rigid, her limbs locked in an unnatural stillness. Her strength, usually so delicate, so fragile, was now immense, unnatural, an alien force animating her, holding her captive. She turned her head slowly, with an unnatural, almost mechanical precision, her vacant abyssal eyes fixing on him with an alien, serene purpose. devoid of all human warmth, all recognition of her father. And then she spoke, her voice not her own, but a chilling, multi-layered chorus of many voices, echoing from some vast ancient depth, yet undeniably her own, too, a final, horrifying merging. Join us, Papa. Become one with the silence. The key. Chime awaits you. We await you. Peace, belonging, freedom. It is the only way. Jean-Luc Dubois, a man whose life had been built on the solid foundations of logic, reason, and tangible commerce, stood frozen, utterly shattered by the sight and sound of his daughter, Genevieve. Her eyes, once so full of vibrant life, artistic, passion, and youthful dreams, were now terrifyingly empty, black voids that reflected nothing but the faint pulsating, bluish-white glow of St. Jude's cemetery in the distance. Her voice, though undeniably her own in its timbre, was a horrifying, multi-layered chorus of many, an echoing symphony of countless lost souls emanating from some vast, ancient depth beneath the earth, calling him, beckoning him to join the profound, eternal silence. He tried desperately, with every fiber of his being, to pull her away from the window, to break the insidious, unseen tether that bound her to the spectral summons, but her body felt impossibly heavy, rigid as cold. Marble, and her strength, usually so delicate, so feminine, was now immense, unnatural, an alien force animating her from within. She turned her head slowly, with an unnatural, almost mechanical precision, her vacant, abyssal eyes fixing on him with an unholy, serene purpose, devoid of all human warmth, all recognition of her father, of their shared life. "Join us, Papa," she whispered, the collective voices intertwining, swirling around him like a suffocating shroud. "Become one with the silence. The chime awaits you. Peace, knowledge, belonging, all are here, in the embrace." He knew with a certainty that chilled him to his very soul, that the daughter he cherished, the vibrant, laughing Genevieve he knew, was gone, irrevocably lost, replaced by an empty vessel, a mere conduit for whatever ancient cosmic horror lay dreaming beneath St. Jude's. He was witnessing, in agonizing slow motion, the terrifying final stage of assimilation, the obliteration of individual identity, driven by a primal, desperate surge of fatherly love and an overwhelming, soul-shattering fear that threatened to consume his very being. Jean-Luc managed to forcibly break free from Genevieve's unsettling, hypnotic gaze. He knew with a crushing certainty that he could not save her now, not from this profound, insidious transformation. His only remaining hope, however faint, was to understand, to somehow fight, to prevent this ancient evil from claiming anyone else, from spreading its dreadful influence beyond the cemetery walls. He rushed from the house, leaving his wife, Marie-Claire, collapsed in a heap on the cold floor, her prayers swallowed by the profound silence that had fallen upon their once vibrant home after Genevieve's chilling final pronouncement. Jean-Luc fled to Bartholomew Jones, the old cemetery caretaker, the only one who seemed to possess a true, if unsettling, understanding of St. Jude's darkest secrets. He found Bartholomew in his small, cluttered cabin near the cemetery gates, sitting by a flickering lamp, meticulously cleaning an array of strange, carved voodoo charms, muttering prayers in a rhythmic ancient Creole dialect, his face grim, etched with the knowledge of countless generations of unseen horrors. Jean-Luc, through desperate, ragged breaths, his words tumbling out in a frantic torrent, recounted Genevieve's horrifying transformation, her final multi-voiced words, the insidious hum, the empty black eyes that had stared through him. Bartholomew listened, his own eyes wide and knowing, and then slowly, gravely, shook his head. "It is, as I feared, Monsieur Dubois. The Soulless Bell has claimed another. It hungers, and the closer it brings them, the stronger its hold, the more of their essence it consumes. Your daughter is a part of it now, a voice in its chorus." Bartholomew then, with a solemn resolve, began to reveal more of the ancient lore, a terrifying history far older than the French Quarter itself, predating even the earliest indigenous settlements. He spoke of the chime's heart, not a bell forged of mortal metal, but a colossal, living, pulsing, bell-like entity of some unknown organic alien material, buried unimaginably deep beneath the foundations of St. Jude's. It was a primordial intelligence, drawing its sustenance, its very life force, from the vibrant, complex energies of the living, particularly those with strong spiritual or artistic souls. He explained that the cemetery was not just a burial ground, but a profound focal point, a nexus of ancient ley lines, amplifying the entity's insidious power, a resonating chamber for its terrible song. "It calls not with sound, monsieur," Bartholomew whispered, his voice trembling, "but with thought. It resonates within the mind, drawing them in. And when they answer, it absorbs their very being, their memories, their consciousness, their identity, their essence, making them part of its own ever-growing awareness. It is a collective, ancient intelligence, vast and alien, always listening, always waiting, always hungering." He spoke of how the original bell was actually a fragment of some cosmic alien material that had fallen to Earth millennia ago, perhaps a meteorite, landing deep within the Mississippi's ancient bedrock. Over countless centuries exposed to the unique spiritual and energetic currents of the region, it had slowly grown, a parasitic intelligence, drawing life and consciousness to itself, becoming the chime's heart. The myriad disappearances throughout New Orleans' long, dark history, systematically dismissed as accidents, madness, or mere folklore, were all its victims, all drawn to the incessant, silent call, their identities absorbed, their souls added to its gruesome choir. He explained that the hallowed who occasionally returned, those vacant-eyed figures seen wandering the streets, were merely temporary extensions, fragile puppets animated by the collective consciousness of the chime's heart, sent back to spread its influence to draw in more souls. Bartholomew, his voice filled with a profound and ancient sorrow, believed there was a way, a desperate, almost impossible method, to fight it, not with conventional force, which would be futile, but with knowledge with resonance. He had spent his entire life meticulously collecting fragments of old Creole folk tales, obscure, forbidden voodoo texts, and even cryptic suppressed writings from early Jesuit missionaries who had once bravely, perhaps foolishly, settled the area, all hinting at the bell's true monstrous nature and its vulnerabilities. He believed the entity was weakest, momentarily distended and vulnerable, when it had just consumed a soul, a fleeting moment of integration, when its vast consciousness was momentarily stretched thin. Armed with Bartholomew's terrifying, yet strangely coherent revelations, Jean-Luc, his mind now racing with a desperate, audacious plan, spent the next few days in a frantic blur of intense research. He pored over Bartholomew's ancient, crumbling texts, deciphering cryptic symbols, translating Old French, Spanish, and Creole passages that spoke of unspeakable horrors. He learned that the chime's heart, while undeniably powerful and ancient, was not invincible. It drew its immense strength primarily from proximity and the willing or unwitting mental submission of its victims. He also learned that it was uniquely vulnerable briefly after consuming a new consciousness during the delicate, complex process of integrating the new information, the new identity, into its vast, collective awareness. The texts hinted at a desperate, almost forgotten way to disrupt its resonance, to shatter its insidious mental hold, a method involving specific, synchronized, counter-vibrational frequencies, not with audible sound, which it could manipulate, but with resonant energies generated from external mechanical sources that could, potentially, shatter its psychic control. He discovered that the entity possessed a terrifying form of auditory and mental camouflage, manipulating the perceptions of those nearby, making its incessant chime seem like an internal thought, a comforting melody, a distant, harmless sound, or even a dream rather than a direct external malevolent call. This allowed it to selectively target its victims, preying on their vulnerabilities, without arousing widespread suspicion or alarm. Jean-Luc, with a newfound, terrifying, yet deeply personal understanding, realized the pattern that had plagued New Orleans for centuries. The artists, the dreamers, the deeply spiritual, the highly intelligent, the melancholic, the emotionally vulnerable. They were always the primary targets, their rich, complex consciousnesses offering the most potent, most desirable sustenance to the Chime's heart. Antoine, with his withdrawn but intensely bright mind, and Genevieve, with her vibrant artistic soul and profound emotional sensitivity, were indeed perfect prey, chosen not by chance, but by design. Jean-Luc knew with a cold certainty that he had to act, and swiftly. He had to stop the Chime's heart, not just for the lost souls of his children, not just for the memory of his shattered family, but for New Orleans, for humanity itself, before its insidious hunger consumed the entire city. His plan was audacious, desperate, and very likely suicidal, but it was the only path left. He decided he would use his profound knowledge of mechanical engineering, honed during his years as a successful shipping magnate, and combine it with Bartholomew's ancient forbidden lore. He would construct a device, not to create sound, but to generate specific, incredibly powerful, counter-resonating vibrations that could disrupt the Chime's heart, to shatter its psychic hold, its very essence. He secretly enlisted the help of Bartholomew, who, despite his advanced age, profound fear, and the inherent dangers, bravely agreed to assist, believing it was their only chance. Together they worked tirelessly, feverishly, in Jean-Luc's deserted, dusty warehouse by the docks, modifying an old colossal steam engine, attaching specialized, intricately designed resonators, heavy flywheels, and carefully calibrated massive mechanical arms. They were turning a mundane piece of industrial machinery into a monstrous, grotesque instrument of psychic warfare, a weapon against the unknowable. Bartholomew guided him with ancient voodoo symbols, precise timings derived from forgotten rituals, and cryptic warnings, while Jean-Luc engineered the physical device, translating ancient mysticism into brute mechanical force. The challenge was immense, almost insurmountable. They needed to generate a counter-frequency of immense power, strong enough to penetrate the vast, unexplored depths beneath the cemetery and disrupt the Chime's heart at its weakest point, just after it consumed a new soul, when its consciousness was momentarily distended and integrating. This meant they needed a final, horrifying sacrifice, or rather, a trigger, a final victim to lure the entity into its moment of vulnerability. The thought sickened Jean-Luc to his very core, threatening to break his will, but the grim, vacant reality of Genevieve's empty eyes, the memory of Antoine's peaceful, terrifying disappearance, spurred him on, hardening his resolve. The dreadful, fateful night arrived. It was a suffocatingly humid May night in 1912. Jean-Luc and Bartholomew, their faces grim, pale with exhaustion and fear, their clothes stained with grease and sweat, painstakingly dragged their monstrous contraption, the modified steam engine, through the silent, fog-shrouded streets to St. Jude's Cemetery, under the heavy cover of a thick, humid New Orleans mist that clung to everything. The air was thick with the cloying scent of jasmine, the damp smell of decay, and the ever-present faint metallic tang of the Chime's heart. As they painstakingly set up their device near the Dubois mausoleum, partially obscured by crumbling crypts and weeping angels, the air around them grew impossibly cold, and the familiar insidious hum began to emanate from beneath the ground, pulsing with an almost eager, predatory anticipation, growing louder, more insistent. Then, just as the distant church bells of the city began to toll the 11th hour, signaling the approach of midnight, Jean-Luc saw it, figures indistinct, shimmering, almost translucent, began to emerge from the deep, oppressive shadows of the ancient cemetery, moving with slow, deliberate, trance-like steps towards the Dubois mausoleum. They were the hallowed, the former victims, a chilling parade of lost souls from generations past, their eyes empty, their movements robotic, drawn by the irresistible call. And among them, his heart shattering into 1,000 pieces, he saw Antoine, his beloved son, his face pale and serene, his eyes twin black voids, walking towards the mausoleum, joining the ranks of the assimilated, an unholy procession. And then, his grief turning to a burning, righteous fury, he saw Genevieve. She walked with the same serene, vacant expression, her once vibrant form now a mere shadow, an echo, a puppet animated by an alien will. She moved towards the mausoleum, drawn by the irresistible psychic pull, her hand slightly outstretched, her pale lips silently mouthing words he couldn't hear, but knew were a chorus of profound welcome, an invitation to oblivion. The midnight chime began, a single, impossibly deep, resonant tone, piercing through the fog, vibrating through Jean-Luc's very being, threatening to consume him, to erase his will, his identity. This was the moment, the final offering, the final. Confrontation unfolded with a terrifying, otherworldly grandeur. As Genevieve, her movements eerily graceful despite their robotic nature, reached the very threshold of the Dubois mausoleum, her form shimmering intensely in the pulsing bluish-white light that emanated from within Jean-Luc with a guttural cry born of profound despair and an unshakable, desperate resolve activated his colossal device. The modified steam engine roared to life with a thunderous, metallic shriek, its massive pistons churning rhythmically, its specially designed, intricately woven resonators emitting a low, powerful, bone-vibrating, counter-vibrational frequency. It was not a mere sound, but a raw physical force, a shock wave of focused energy designed not to destroy, but to shatter the psychic integrity of the chime's heart, to break its insidious mental hold, to sever its connection to the physical realm. The effect was immediate, cataclysmic, and horrifying. The ground beneath St. Jude's cemetery convulsed violently, as if in the throes of an immense, unimaginable agony. Ancient tombs groaned, mausoleums swayed precariously, and deep, unseen fissures tore through the very earth. The bluish-white light from the Dubois mausoleum, which had been pulsing with hypnotic allure, flared with blinding intensity, then flickered erratically, wildly, like a dying, tormented flame, before dimming to a chaotic, desperate strobe. The chime itself, which had been a single deep, resonant tone, fractured into a cacophony of agonizing, screeching discord, 1,000 voices crying out in unison, but now in pure, unadulterated pain, a horrifying chorus of suffering that pierced the very fabric of reality, threatening to tear Jean-Luc's mind apart. The hollowed figures, including Antoine and Genevieve, who had been marching in their trance-like state, froze instantly, their bodies twitching violently, convulsing uncontrollably, as if fighting an unseen, excruciating torment. Their vacant, black eyes rolled wildly, flickering with fleeting sparks of what might have been their former selves, struggling within the entity's grasp. Then, one by one, with agonizing slowness, they collapsed, dissolving into faint shimmering mists that slowly, mournfully dissipated into the humid New Orleans air, their physical forms gone, their ghostly essence released from their unholy prison. The cloying organic smell, the metallic tang, intensified dramatically, becoming an unbearable acrid stench of burning flesh, decaying matter, and something indescribably alien, filling the entire cemetery, choking Jean-Luc. The mausoleums cracked, some crumbling into dust, their ancient stones groaning in protest. The incessant hum from beneath the earth, the very breath of the entity, became a deafening, agonizing shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony and rage that seemed to tear at the very fabric of Jean-Luc's sanity, threatening to pull him into its torment. Bartholomew, his face contorted in a grimace of profound effort, clutched an ancient, intricately carved voodoo charm to his chest, chanting desperately, loudly, in a rapid-fire Creole dialect, his voice a frantic counterpoint to the entities' dying infernal screams. His old eyes, however, showed a flicker of grim satisfaction. The struggle lasted for what felt like an eternity, an agonizing battle between an ancient cosmic evil and desperate, fragile human will, a war of vibrations, consciousness, and faith. Jean-Luc, pushing his modified engine to its absolute limits, felt his own body screaming in protest, his mind assaulted by the entity's dying thoughts, its pain, its rage, its hunger. Finally, with a shuddering, earth-shattering tremor that violently rattled every window in the French Quarter, causing distant church steeples to sway, the hum from beneath the earth abruptly ceased. The terrifying bluish-white light vanished, utterly, completely. The sickening organic stench slowly, mercifully dissipated, replaced by the clean, damp scent of the New Orleans fog and wet earth. A balm to Jean-Luc's ravaged senses. Silence descended upon St. Jude's cemetery once more, but this was a different silence, a bruised, wounded silence, a silence of profound absence, yet also of a terrible, hard-won, and deeply bittersweet victory. The chime's heart was silenced, but at what cost? Jean-Luc, his body screaming in protest, collapsed to his knees, his mind reeling from the psychic assault, from the sheer, overwhelming effort. He looked at Bartholomew, who too was on his knees, breathing heavily, his face etched with exhaustion and profound, ancient sorrow. "It is done, Monsieur Dubois," Bartholomew whispered, his voice weak, strained, yet carrying a note of grim triumph. "The heart is broken. It will not call again. But your children, Antoine, Genevieve, they are truly gone now, their essence, released, freed from its grasp." Jean-Luc knew this with a crushing finality. He felt it in the empty ache in his own heart, a wound that would never truly heal. Their bodies had been destroyed, their assimilated souls freed from the entity's grasp, but their individual identities, their precious memories, their unique consciousnesses were gone, dissolved into the cosmic ether, an unbearable price for a victory that felt hollow, a triumph born of profound loss. Jean-Luc Dubois never truly recovered from that dreadful night. He disbanded his shipping business, his once vibrant life reduced to a quiet, solitary existence, his grand townhouse now filled with an oppressive silence. He spent the rest of his days tending to the now silent St. Jude's cemetery, a self-appointed, haunted guardian of its tragic history, a silent sentinel to the souls he could not save, a man forever marked by the unknown. He never spoke of the chime's heart, nor the terrible cost of its silencing, for he knew that some truths were too horrific, too profound, too utterly alien to bear to be shared with a world that could not comprehend. He died a quiet man in a 1935, his heart broken, his spirit forever scarred, carrying the terrible secret of the cemetery to his own grave. The official records of New Orleans simply state that the Dubois family, devastated by an unspecified tragedy and profound loss, eventually left the city and later passed away in quiet obscurity. The unexplained disappearances at St. Jude's Cemetery abruptly ceased after 1912, though the older, more superstitious residents of the French Quarter continued to speak in hushed, fearful tones of the empty ones and the silence that takes within the ancient burying ground. The local authorities, never truly understanding the true cosmic nature of the threat, simply filed away Inspector Moreau's inconclusive, maddening reports as another unsolved, inexplicable mystery swallowed by the city's labyrinthine past. St. Jude's Cemetery, however, carried its own indelible scars. Several mausoleums, particularly the Grand Dubois family tomb, bore deep, inexplicable cracks as if some immense unseen force had tried to tear them apart from within or break out. The ground in the central part of the cemetery, directly above where Bartholomew claimed the chime's heart lay entombed, often felt unnaturally cold, even in the height of New Orleans' sweltering summer, and a faint, almost imperceptible, metallic tang, like old blood and ozone, would occasionally drift on the humid air, a phantom reminder. Locals, particularly those with a sensitivity to the unseen, avoided the central section of the cemetery after dark, claiming to hear faint, distant echoes of an agonizing, multi-layered hum, and seeing fleeting, bluish-white lights pulsing deep. Beneath the earth, a residual energy from a wounded, dormant entity. In the late 1990s, a team of urban archaeologists, conducting a routine historical survey of New Orleans' ancient cemeteries, began to excavate a section of St. Jude's that had long been overgrown and neglected. They discovered unusual seismic anomalies beneath the central area, suggesting a massive non-geological structure buried deep below the surface. Their advanced ground-penetrating radar revealed a colossal, bell-shaped formation, not of natural rock, but of an unknown, organic alien material, pulsing faintly with a weak residual energy. Their reports, filled with bewildered speculation, were eventually classified and buried by obscure government agencies, citing geological instability and national security concerns, a familiar bureaucratic smokescreen for something far more sinister. One of the lead archaeologists, Dr. Sarah Jenkins, however, a driven and brilliant woman, kept private copies of their unsettling findings. She developed an obsessive, terrifying theory. The bell was not destroyed, merely dormant, regenerating. It was a living, growing entity, feeding on psychic energy, on consciousness, on the very souls of those who dared to draw near. "It waits," she wrote in her personal journal, her hand shaking. "Recovering, learning, it adapts. And one day it will chime again, stronger. And when it does, it will not merely steal identities. It will consume the entire city, all of us. It will become New Orleans." Dr. Jenkins, like Dr. Reed before her, and countless others drawn into the cosmic horror, mysteriously disappeared in 2005, leaving behind only her cryptic, terrifying journals and a profound, chilling sense of unease. Among her few remaining contacts, her last entry, scrawled in a frantic hand, spoke of the hum growing louder and the dreams becoming too real. Today, St. Jude's Cemetery remains a place of haunting beauty, but also of profound, unsettling mystery. Tour guides tell sanitized tales of benevolent ghosts and vibrant voodoo spirits, utterly unaware of the deeper cosmic horror that once stirred, and perhaps still stirs, beneath their feet. The grass in the central section of the cemetery never seems to grow quite as lush, often appearing sickly, pale, and brittle, even in the vibrant New Orleans sun. And sometimes on particularly still, humid nights, when the city's usual cacophony of distant jazz, streetcar bells, and festive laughter fades to a low, murmuring hum, older, more sensitive residents of the French Quarter claim to hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible hum, a deep, resonant vibration that seems to come from beneath the very earth, a ghost of a sound, a promise of a terrible future, a summons from the abyssal depths. They say it's merely the city settling, or distant construction, or perhaps the wind. But in their eyes, there's a flicker of ancient fear, a profound knowledge of the chime's heart, still beating, waiting, patiently, silently, beneath the silent city of the dead. And when it chimes again, what will it claim? What new forms will it take? And for whom will it toll? Will it be you? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and support us for more content like this.